Thank you very much, Jonathan. It's an absolute pleasure to be here tonight amongst such distinguished parliamentary colleagues. And can I start by saying it's about bloody time we put a bit of optimism into this country again. We know this negotiation's going to be tough, but we must never forget why we're in this position, why we stand here today and why BrexitCentral exists. The negotiations pit ourselves against these 27 member states, and there will be some cooperation, but they have a different slant on their negotiations and their preferred outcomes, so we must try and meet them in the middle. The bureaucrats behind the EU experiment will be in no doubt that they will want to treat the UK as toughly as possible. So we don't want that to serve as because they'll want to serve that as a deterrent to other member states. So whereas the majority of individual governments might be likely to want to negotiate with the UK, they might want to, because they don't want to penalise their own economies, any attempt by Brussels to slap tariffs on us will inevitably harm them more. It's important that we don't forget why we set out on this journey in the first place, and we must never forget the end game when locked in rooms in Brussels. Of course, it's vital that we take back control of our laws, our borders and our judiciary. But what that boils down to on the ground, what are the material changes that we want to see? For some, it will be about exporting more goods and opening more trade routes, about utilising our ports around the UK, in our coastal communities, which have sadly been so let down by globalisation, and they haven't felt those benefits. In the southwest, in general, and in North Cornwall in particular, we have two priorities for Brexit. Firstly, we want to take back control of our fishing waters. And secondly, we want to take control of our agricultural sector. Both our farming and our fishing sectors have been ravaged by bureaucratic EU policies, and that must stop. Cornwall's once great fishing community has been decimated under the Common Fisheries Policy, while its region's farmers have been restricted by the Common Agricultural Policy. Not only do our farmers and fishermen know this, but so do the residents that walk around those streets in those coastal communities, and that's why they voted for Brexit. I make no bones about it. The EU has done us little favour in terms of Cornwall and our farmers and our fishermen, but this speech isn't about looking back, it's about looking forward. For over 40 years, the people of this great nation and their elected representatives have been unable to properly manage our land and our seas. While we leave the EU, this gives us a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to reform how we manage those agricultural and fishery sectors, how we care for our land, our rivers and our seas, but also, importantly, how we safeguard our environment. We need to do things differently. We need to innovate and create domestic policies to manage our farms and our fishing grounds and our environment. And I have absolute faith in our DEFRA ministers in delivering that promise. By leaving the Common Fisheries Policy, we'll take back control of our territorial waters and decide who can catch fish and how much they can catch. But of course, other countries will be able to access our waters, but for the first time in 5 decades, it will be on our terms and under our control. We can allocate quota again on a basis of scientific sustainability, making sure that our healthy marine environment and a profitable fishing industry. Down in Cornwall, we've seen our fishing industry shrink with less boats and less people working on them. The process of revitalising our fishing industry in somewhere like Cornwall will not be easy or quick, but we will make it happen. I'd like to see our fishermen have access to government grants, and I'll be lobbying the DEFRA ministers to ensure that they can invest in their businesses and modernise their fleets for the times that they have ahead. I want to see our fishing industry land more of our fish in our British ports, while we make proper safeguards to maintain sustainable fishing stocks. Fisheries were sacrificed by Ted Heath in the 1970s when they were seen as being expendable. But the tide's turning, and it's coming back in for fishing. Fishing can be a hard and unforgiving industry to work in, and the same can be said for UK farming. Like our fishermen, our farmers have been governed by an unfit regulatory system under the Common Agricultural Policy. Under the CAP, we see billions of subsidies handed to landowners, regardless of how they manage the land. CAP rewards the size of land allocations ahead of good environmental practice. which often puts resources into the hands of the very wealthy rather than for the common good and for the natural environment. It isn't right that a hard-working farmer who runs an effective farm receives one level of subsidy, while his wealthy neighbour receives just as much for doing absolutely nothing. Farming needs certainty, and I welcome the commitment of this government to safeguard farming subsidies until 2022. But while support is crucial, so is reform. Farmers are held back by the bureaucratic nature of the CAP. It stifles productivity and it impedes environmental stewardship. As we head towards our exit in 2019, it's vital that in conjunction with this new fisheries policy, we develop a new farming policy too. One which distributes subsidy according to need and productivity, whilst encouraging environmental practices and higher animal welfare standards. One which considers volatility mitigation measures to alleviate the impact of farming exposure to weather, pests and price volatility. A new farming policy which better promotes British food to consumers both at home and abroad, and which supports global trade and healthy lifestyles. I know this is an uncertain time for farmers. I know the pound's fluctuating and dietary habits are changing, and they have to plan ahead. But I want our farmers and fishermen to know that this party supports absolutely everything they do for this country of ours. Brexit will bring huge benefits to these industries that I've described, and it's vital that we continue to listen and help, while also making it absolutely clear that we will honour the referendum result for them and for the rest of this great country. Thank you all very much.